All right, so welcome to a very long video. I am going to be combining the April wrap-up that I filmed at the beginning of this month with my May wrap-up that I am filming right now. So I don't know how long this video is going to end up. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I did read 22 books in May, so we'll see. But without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in April. Take it away, past me. Hello, and welcome to the No Snook. Welcome especially to my second wrap-up video ever on my channel. This is my April wrap-up. It was a very slow reading month. I think I read a total of 2 books in the beginning of the month, and then I read like 3 or 4 towards the end. It was a rough one. I only read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books in total this month. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter video, but most of these were either ebooks or books that already returned to the library. So again, I'll just be putting the covers in the side here. And yeah, let's just get into it. The first book that I read this month was The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang. And here's the thing. So I tried reading The Kiss Quotient, and I hated it. I think I got all of 2 pages into it before I DNF'd it. I could not handle it at all. And I don't think that it's necessarily, I don't think it's a problem with the author herself. I think basically the problem I had with it was a lot of books with like autistic main characters who are explicitly autistic and not just autism coded. The way that the writers tend to write about them, and this happens in like TV shows too, is it's very much like, I am autistic. I am doing this thing because I am autistic. I am so autistic. I'm so weird and autistic. And I just really don't enjoy that tone of writing and that kind of autism representation. It just comes off very, I don't know, it just rubs something in me the wrong way. So I actually didn't expect to like The Heart Principle, but I thought I would give it a try. And I really liked it. I rated it 4.5 stars. And what I think made the tone of this book different from The Kiss Quotient is, one, it's like, The Kiss Quotient was one of her first books, and I think it took her some time to kind of feel into the voice she wanted, right? And like, I'm fine with that. I know sometimes it takes authors a little while to like really get comfortable in their writing voice, and it's not a big deal. Like, a lot of people liked Kiss Quotient, it just wasn't for me. So I think what especially set this book apart is that The Kiss Quotient has a character who I believe has been diagnosed from a very young age, whereas The Heart Principle has a clearly very autistic character who, in the course of the book, discovers that she has autism. And that's a very different character arc, and one that I can resonate with a lot more than like somebody who's been diagnosed from birth. And also the tone was very different. It felt like Helen Hoang didn't need to keep like reminding us that the character was autistic. It felt like she was more comfortable in just showing us an autistic character and trusting us as the readers to understand what we were seeing. Also, the romance was so good. It was, and here's the thing, I've said this about a lot of the romance books that I've reviewed on this channel, and this one also sticks with that pattern. I didn't mind the third act, like, you know, reversal, miscommunication, betrayal, like turn that happens in every romance book. I didn't mind it so much in this book. I mean, I minded it a little bit. Like, I didn't completely vibe with it, but I felt like it mostly made sense and it wasn't completely out of the blue, and I didn't feel like the characters' reactions were completely out of sync with what I feel like a person would do in that situation. Now, a note for this book is that it does involve the death of a parent, and also like the main character is a caretaker for her bedridden father after a stroke. I don't consider that a spoiler. I consider that just like a content note. there is some pretty heavy discussion of grief and some pretty heavy representation of autistic burnout in this book, and I think it's handled very well, but that is just a general content note for this book. Like it definitely ends well, but it does have some heavy stuff in the middle. But yeah, I loved this book, honestly. I will definitely be picking up the next book by Helen Hoang and hoping that it's as good as this one. So the next book I finished was The Thinking Woman's Guide to Real Magic by Emily Croy Barker. I rated it 4 stars. I'm not sure why I rated it 4 stars, but I think that's the correct rating for it. I feel like maybe it could be higher, but I'm not actually going to rate it higher. I've just realized my shirt is stained, but I don't know if you can see that, and if you can, pretend you can't, because I've filmed too much of this video to change my shirt and start over again. Anyway, I was pretty sure that I had read this book before, but for some reason the summary wasn't ringing a bell. I definitely had read this book before. I'm not sure I finished it, but a lot of it was very familiar to me. I didn't mind the reread. I had forgotten so much of it that it didn't really feel boring. And let's see, what do I want to say about this book? I enjoyed like the portal fantasy of it all. I enjoyed the twist on the usual fae stealing a person away. Of course I love our main character, whose name I have forgotten, and I love the wizard love interest secondary main character as well. I've also forgotten his name. Here's the thing. We're going to talk about the sequel, which I did not read. I got 50% of the way into that book and I DNF'd it, and here's the reason why. The second book, which is called How to Talk to a Goddess and Other Lessons in Real Magic, I guess spoilers for the end of Thinking Woman's Guide to Real Magic and spoilers for the plot of this sequel, but the Thinking Woman's Guide to Real Magic ends with her going back to her own world, which I think I can't imagine thinking a plot for this book good where she doesn't go back to her own world. The second book kind of takes a while to pick back up again. Of course she ends up going back. Of course. I mean, there's a sequel, of course she ends up going back. Here's the thing. Emily Barker does not let our two characters, who we are very interested in, who we really want to see together, be together for very long at all. She almost immediately, as soon as they've reunited, separates them. She gets all of this other plot stuff involved, and I just lost interest. I wasn't interested anymore. I really liked these characters, I really liked their character dynamic, and I liked the extra plot stuff that was happening, but not as much as I liked the characters. And so when the second book split them up and didn't let me see them together, and I actually went and read some of the reviews, and some of the reviews are saying the same thing, that the plot stuff was getting in the way of the character dynamic, and they found that really annoying. So in general, I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy that they split up the main characters like that, and so I DNF'd it. I may eventually finish it, but don't count on it. Next, I read Squire by Nadia Shamas and Sarah my brain stopped working, and Sarah Alfagia, I think. I rated it 4.75 stars. It's a graphic novel. I've been looking forward to this graphic novel, I think, since last year, and it didn't disappoint. The art is gorgeous. I love the colors. I love the architecture and the clothing and everything. It all felt really, really good and really rich and beautiful. It felt a little short. It felt a little rushed, but that's what kept it from being 5 stars, is that it just felt a little rushed and a little, I don't know. It's difficult for me to put it to words exactly what the issue there is. I think my dad is cutting the grass. I'm really not sure why. But I'm not gonna stop recording. So if you hear lawnmower sounds in the background, yeah, he is. Why is he cutting the grass? I don't know. If you hear lawnmower sounds in the background, I'm very sorry, but I'm not gonna stop recording this video. Low effort channel, besties, low effort channel. Consider it extra ambient noise. So, what was I saying? The plot just felt a little bit rushed. The resolution felt a little hurried. But in all, I think it hit like the emotional beats that it needed to hit, and I liked, like the moral of the story, I guess, and the themes and everything. It just felt a little fast for me. But it was a great book. It was a good graphic novel. I don't have any like major issues with it or anything. And then next I read A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lin. This is the first book in the Book of Tea duology. I rated it 4.5 stars. I think I might bump that up to 4.75, but I'm not sure. It wasn't like a stellar book that like knocked my socks off, but it was a really good read. I really enjoyed it. My actual favorite part about this book is that even though it ended on a massive, horrible, awful cliffhanger, I only have to wait until August to read the second book, which, since this released in March, is an insane turnaround time. We must have written them like together and they must be being published separately or something, because a 5-month turnaround on a sequel is just insane. I really love also, like, you're gonna see the cover. I don't have it to hold up, but you're gonna see the cover. The cover is gorgeous, and I might show both of the covers because they're just so pretty. And I think they would be amazing to like display fronts out on a bookshelf or something. What I'm saying is, if you're really interested in these and they sound good, you should buy both of them in hardcover because they're gorgeous, if you can. My one like quibble with this book was that I'm getting a little bit tired of books that have main characters who have imposter syndrome. I'm getting bored of it. I'm getting tired of it. But I think this book managed to win me over because the main character doesn't stay in that place forever. And I'm pretty sure, I'm very hopeful that by the second book, that will have kind of evaporated, we'll have moved on from that. And I think part of it is that I'm reading a lot of YA, and maybe that's just kind of where YA authors default to, because they're writing for teens, and teens often deal with a lot of imposter syndrome. I don't know. All I really want to say as to that is I just wish there were more main characters, like the main character of Iron Widow and She Who Became the Sun, both of which are just incredibly confident. They know what they're doing, and they're gonna do it. And I really enjoy that in a main character. But specifically the magic system in A Magic Steeped in Poison it's literally tasty. It's literally aromatic. The herb descriptions, the herb and spices and tea descriptions, she describes the smell, she describes the flavor, she describes I don't know the right word for it, but like she describes the smell and the flavor and the atmosphere of the tea so well, which is great because it's a tea-based magic system, that I really felt like I could taste the tea that was being made. And I could smell the tea that was being made. And the magic system in general is just fascinating. And that's really what hooked me. Along with, I did really enjoy the characters. I did enjoy the character dynamics. A little bit, it felt, I don't know. I feel like I say this about a lot of books, and it may just be the speed at which I read that makes endings of books feel a little bit rushed. The ending of this book felt a little bit rushed, but I'll be honest, not enough for me to really be mad at it. I feel like now we come to Sabriel, the first book in the Oporson series by Garth Nix. Put the cover here. I have been trying to read this book for years. No joke. I think I've checked it out as an ebook at least twice. I've checked it out as an audiobook at least 3 times. I have checked it out as a physical book at least 1 other time. And I finally just sat down and read it in a day. And one of my friends told me the reason I was having so much trouble reading it is because it's a mediocre book. I rated it 4 stars. I don't think it's... I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, but I liked the plot. I liked, that this ending did not feel rushed. I liked the characters. I actually liked the characters so much that I started reading the sequel and got bummed out that we weren't following the same characters. I kind of knew we wouldn't be, but I was just missing them so much that I had to stop reading Lyriel for a while. But I really liked this book. I really liked the characters. I loved Mogget. I loved Touchstone. I loved Sabriel herself. I liked all of the lore that we got, and the magic system was really interesting. What's not to love about a magic system that uses bells, right? I will definitely be reading the whole series. As you will have seen in my haul video, I have the fourth and fifth books, and I'm reading the second right now, and I will be reading the third. All in all, solid book, 4 stars. I really like Garth Nix's writing. I don't think this was his best book, but it's not a bad book. Next, I read Your Life is Mine by Nathan Ripley, which is a thriller about a girl who grew up in a cult and then has to return to her hometown where this cult is still active to prevent a mass shooting. I rated it 3.75 stars because it didn't blow me away, but it wasn't a bad read. I felt, I repeated myself a bunch in my review of it, but basically, it felt like it did what a thriller is supposed to do. It did what a mystery is supposed to do. The characters were all very interesting. The mystery was very compelling. The cult element it wasn't what I was expecting. Let me say that. I'm a sucker for books about cults, but this wasn't the kind of cult I was expecting. It wasn't particularly a religious cult. It was more like a cult of personality, which is fine. That's still a cult. But it wasn't what I was expecting going in. It was still good. It was still interesting. It still held my interest. The mystery was really good. And I loved especially the best friends dynamic that we see between the main character and her best friend. I loved that because it was a really good anchor point and a really good bright spot for the rest of the darkness really of the book to kind of revolve around, and that bright spot and anchoring point really helped the book not just devolve into darkness, I think. I liked it. I think I might actually be getting more into thrillers. We'll see. I'm probably not going to read a lot of them because it kind of depends on my mood. I wasn't super affected by this one, but sometimes, a darker, heavier book like that can really drag my mood down. But I don't know. I follow Books with Layla. I think that's her channel name, who reads a lot of thrillers and a lot of horror. And while I probably won't ever read horror, I do think thrillers are really interesting. And the last book that I read, I finished it last night, was Unravel the Stars by Elizabeth Lim, which was the second book in the Blood of the Stars duology. Now, I read, what's it called? What's the first book called? Spin the Dawn. I read Spin the Dawn in 2020. It was one of the only books that I read in all of 2020, and I really liked it at the time. I rated Unravel the Dusk 3.5. I might actually move that down to 3 and a quarter, a single quarter, because I didn't love it. It didn't stick with me. I was really only reading it to find out what happened at the end, which I guess means that it was interesting, but I felt like I was just dragging myself through the middle parts to find out what happened at the end. Now, I did like the ending. I liked the ending a lot. I would have been severely disappointed if this book had a very sad ending. I would not have enjoyed that. I would not have liked that. And it had a good, satisfying ending. It had an okay, I don't know, it didn't hook me, it didn't interest me like I really wanted it to. I felt kind of disappointed by it. I'm less disappointed by it than I was by Redemptor last month, but it's kind of echoes of that same feeling of I remember really liking the first book and being very interested to see what happened in the second, and the second really it didn't hit for me. And I think I do wonder if part of this, Spin the Dawn was published in 2019 and Unravel the Dusk was published in 2020, so probably that's not the problem with this one. But I do wonder if part of some of my disappointment with sequel books like Redemptor does come from pandemic writing, because it's hard to write in a pandemic. It's hard to write a good book when, the world is falling down around your ears and you're stressed and everyone is stressed and all of that. So I don't know. This one was published in 2020 though, so I'm not so sure that was a pandemic writing issue. Maybe it was. I don't know. But yeah, that was the last book I read, and it was kind of a note to end the month on, but I'm okay with that. I didn't read very many books, but most of the books I read were good and I enjoyed them, and my reading slump is well and truly broken because I have been reading a book about every 2 days again, that's my sweet spot. That's where I really like to be. All right, now for the books that I read in May. As I said in the intro to this video, I read 22 books in May. I don't know how I did this, but I did do it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start out with the books that I read for the 2022 Asian Readathon that was taking place in May. And I did complete all of the prompts. I read all the books that I planned to, and so we're gonna go through this one by one. So I read 4 books because I combined one of the prompts and it applied to 2 books. No, 2 of the prompts applied to 1 book. And then I did end up DNFing one of the books that I talked about in my TBR because I really didn't like it. We'll talk about that in a minute. I read 1 nonfiction book and 3 fiction books for this readathon. The nonfiction book I read was It's Not About the Burqa, edited by Miriam Khan. It is a collection of essays by Muslim women about Muslim faith, about like modesty, culture, marriage, expectations, all of that. And I was super excited to read this, and it delivered. My only criticism of the collection is that I think it was organized kind of loosely by like the theme of the essay, and because of that, and because I was like reading it kind of all at once, I did end up sometimes reading 2 essays back to back that felt very similar in a way that kind of made it difficult for me to read the second essay, but it's not really, like, if I had been able to read this book like on shuffle, I think I would have liked it more, but all of the essays were great. Like, I didn't dislike any of the essays. They were all very well written, and I really enjoyed the insight, I guess, into Islam and the experiences of women in Islam. And I did find a little bit of resonance with like my experiences growing up a woman in fundamentalist Christianity. You know, I mean, the experiences are not super similar, but there is, you know, a thread of patriarchal culture and the ways that it uses religion in there. And then really quickly, I'm going to talk about the book that I DNF'd, which was A Time to Dance. I don't remember the author's name, and I'm not going to bother to look it up because it isn't in this list. It was a like poetry book, like a narrative poetry book, and the main character was a disabled young girl, and I thought it was going to be very interesting, and instead it was inspiration porn, which I was quite upset by. And pretty much I got, I don't know, like 10 poems in, and the accident happens that leads to this character becoming disabled. And as she's sort of entering rehab, one of the doctors like talks about how she's not disabled, she's differently abled. And that was like final straw. I was already getting inspiration porn vibes from this book, and now you've used that term. And as far as I can tell, this author is able-bodied, and like that just makes it worse. If you don't know, or you weren't super familiar with the concept, inspiration porn is when able-bodied people use stories of disabled people like having very like pushing themselves to have very similar experiences to able-bodied people. For instance, if you've ever seen a video of someone who is wheelchair bound, not a term that I would ever use, but who like walks down the aisle for their wedding day, that's inspiration porn. It's very often shared by able-bodied people who are using it to make themselves feel better about their life and their ability, and it's bullshit and I hate it, and it's not okay. Able-bodied people should not be engaging with disabled narratives like that, and they should not be writing disability narratives that are nothing but inspiration porn. Enough about that. the books that I actually did read, the first of which is The Weight of Our Sky by, I can't read the author name. by Hannah Alkaf. This was a pretty heavy book. It deals with I think like a week or maybe two, probably not even that long, in Kuala Lumpur when a civil war breaks out. And it's a young teen who is separated from her mother and is trying to get back to her mother in the midst of just like all this chaos and violence. And it was like a pretty heavy book. Also, a content note, the main character does have OCD, and because of the time period and her religious beliefs, believes herself to be like possessed or influenced by a jinn. I was expecting this to maybe not be okay for me, but I didn't have a problem with it. The way it's talked about honestly felt a little bit relatable to my experiences as a young teen with mental illness, thinking I was being influenced by demons. And I think overall, the way the OCD is handled, it's handled very well, in my opinion. So I didn't find it upsetting or triggering. But that's just, some of my viewers I know may be bothered by that, so it's something I wanted to point out. The next book I read was After the Dragons. It's a novella by Cynthia Zhang, and this is about a pair of like university-aged boys in Beijing, and there's dragons in it, and there's two viewpoint characters, and one of them is chronically ill. In fact, terminally ill, and I loved this. I loved the story, I loved the way it was written, I loved our viewpoint characters, and I really liked the ending. I'm going to talk briefly about the ending. This may be considered spoilers for some people, so if you don't want to hear it, just skip ahead to when the next cover is on the screen. I really liked the ending because it does not end with a character death. And I feel like that would have been messy and not okay if the author had like ended with like a tragedy. I think it would have felt to me like this author using a disabled narrative for like, I don't know. I wouldn't have liked it, but it doesn't end with the terminally ill character dying. It's very open-ended, and it lets you imagine that perhaps he has many, many more years to live and significant quality of life in those years, or perhaps, you don't know. There's even like some openness left there in the narrative for potentially there's a cure that will allow him to no longer be terminally ill. So I liked that. As a disabled person, I appreciated that this wasn't a narrative being used for like emotional shock value, I guess. So, next book, The Wild Ones by, I know the name, but I'm not gonna nail it, by Nafisa Azad. I loved this book. I haven't been mentioning ratings because I've been forgetting to do that, but I rated this one 5 stars, and I think the others were all over 4 stars. I'm not sure exactly how much over, but they were all over 4 stars. But I rated this book 5 stars. I loved it. It's beautiful. The narrative is told in a really interesting way, kind of like it's excerpts from a record that the Wild Ones keep of their lives. And you have first-person singular narrative from one character, and then you have a first-person plural point of view from like the rest of the group, minus that one character. And it's just a fascinating viewpoint to have. I loved it. And then in between those sections that are telling the story of the present, you have short chapters that are giving you backstory on the various girls in the group, and I loved it. It was beautiful. I think this book was an amazing exploration of trauma and healing and the ways that traumatized people sometimes become martyrs or like obsessed with saving other traumatized people. And it explored it in a really good way, and the ending was amazing. This was a super cathartic and beautiful book to read. Definitely, I do recommend it. There's some mild content warnings because it does touch on suicide, domestic abuse, sexual assault. Like, obviously all of the girls in this group are traumatized, and it does touch on their trauma. So it could potentially be triggering. Just thought I would mention that. So those are all the books that I read for the Asian Readathon, and now we're going to get into the other books that I read this month. Starting with Tell Me Everything, The Story of a Private Investigation by Erica Krause, which I rated 4.5 stars, and this is such a good memoir. I really think I need to read more memoirs because I liked this one so much. It was a really well told story. Now again, another content note for this book, it is the story of a private investigation associated with a court case that is about several sexual assaults at a university. So that may not be something you want to read about. I personally found it was handled pretty well, and any talk about what happened is very just stating facts, and I didn't find it graphic, but you may feel differently. One of the negative reviews of this book, I was poking around in the reviews, says that there's too much weather in the book, which I found to be a fascinating negative review because I didn't even notice. But thinking back, the way that she uses the weather and the changing of the seasons to mark the passage of time, and the way that she describes the weather as it mirroring and going along with her emotional state and the state of the investigation, I found honestly quite beautiful. I really liked it. And I think her descriptions of what's happening, the environment and all of that, really helped ground me into the narrative and kind of make me feel very present and there with her as she's narrating these experiences. I thought this was a really good book. It also has, themes of trauma and healing and recovery. And because this is a real person's memoir and not a fictional book, it isn't tied up into a nice, neat bow like The Wild Ones is. But the conclusion was very satisfying for me personally. The next book I read was the first volume of Witch Hat Atelier, which I liked. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to read it because I have a little bit of difficulty with graphic novel format, and it's manga, so it's read the opposite direction that I'm used to. But I think the little bit of extra concentration that I had to keep to remember to read basically backwards for me helps me follow the flow of the panels better, and I didn't have a lot of difficulty with it. I really liked the story hook. The art style is really fun, and I like the characters, and I'm definitely all of the rest of the series that's published is on my list to put it on hold at my library for this coming month. Next, I read Count Your Lucky Stars, which is the third book in the Written in the Stars series by Alexandra Bellafleur. I didn't realize it was a third book. I thought it was a standalone until I went to add it to my story graph, and I was like, oh, fascinating. I may or may not read the other two books. It's all kind of about the same group of people, and so I did see the romances that the other two books are about in this book, and I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm curious enough about their stories to go back and read the other two books, but I might be. I really enjoyed this book. I rated it 4.5 stars. It's a really cute sapphic romance. I liked that it was about older characters too. I think I need to read more adult romances because they have much more relatable and much more just problems and difficulties in the relationship and in life that I can relate to much better than teen romances. Basically, our main characters are two people in their late 20s, early 30s, and they used to be a thing in high school. They were best friends, and they had a week-long fling, and then they went their separate ways. So now they're meeting, they're kind of forced back together by circumstances, and there's a lot of miscommunication in this. If you don't like it, I was able to tolerate it because I was in both of their viewpoints and I could see why they were having difficulty communicating, and I was like, this makes sense, I think. But it may not be tolerable for you if you really don't like miscommunication or lack of communication in stories. I liked it. I thought it was cute. It had a cute ending. It was a nice fluffy romance read. And then next I finished, I haven't read Clariel yet, but I read the next 3 books in the A Porson series, Lyriel, A Porson, and Golden Hand. I skipped Clariel because it's a prequel and I'm going to come back to it. I liked these books a lot. Lyria was a little bit difficult for me to get into, I think because of the viewpoint switch from Sabriel, and I was kind of like, oh no, am I not going to see anything of Sabriel and Touchstone? Like, what's going on? But I did finally get into it, and I liked it a lot. I like Garth Nix writing a lot. Lyria I rated 4.75 stars, Abhor Sin I rated 5 stars, and Golden Hand I rated 4.75. So I really enjoyed all three, and I definitely, like, one thing I noticed going from Abhor Sin to Golden Hand, there's like a 13-year gap between those two books, is that Garth Nix's writing style gets like looser and less formal and kind of less uptight, which I did really like. I really liked the like narrative tone shift in Golden Hand a lot, and I think, and apparently this is not a popular opinion, but I liked Golden Hand, I think, more than the first three. I mean, I know the rating is lower, but that's mostly because I didn't enjoy the pacing of Golden Hand exactly, but I had that same problem with Lyriel, so it's not unique. I don't know, I just think I like the looser and newer Garth Nix tone more than I like the tone of the first three books, and that's not a big deal to me. Like, it wasn't that big of a shift. Anyway, I think too, maybe I didn't jive with the first three books as much, which have that like more formal tone, because I started out with one of Garth Nix's newest books, The Left-Handed Booksellers of London, and so I was much more used to his current narrative tone than I was to his older one. Anyway, I loved the characters, I liked the plot. I have a little bit of a bone to pick with the pacing of a couple of these books, but I don't know, it's not that bad. I also started reading mysteries this month because the thriller I read last month kind of really got me in the mood, and I was like, maybe I need to start reading mysteries. Maybe that's what I need to spice up my reading life. And I liked every single mystery book that I read this month, so I think I was correct. I read the first three Miss Marple books by Agatha Christie, and like when people say Agatha Christie, the Queen of Mystery, like, they mean it. They're serious. I loved all of these. Murder at the Vicarage, which is the first, I rated 5 stars because I really liked the viewpoint character, and we see a lot of Miss Marple because the POV character and Miss Marple are next door neighbors, and the POV character has, like, the murder happens in his house. I just really love everything about Miss Marple, and I think that has been my favorite one so far because it's set in her exact village, and so we see a lot of her and a lot of like her neighborhood dynamics and stuff, and it was really fun. Another clap to sync the audio because my camera consistently cuts out at 20 minutes. I was talking about the Agatha Christie books and saying that I really enjoyed the next two after Murder at the Vicarage. Not quite as much because we don't see as much of Miss Marple, but I'm hoping the fourth book I will see more of her. And I'm definitely gonna like read all of the Miss Marple books in the coming months, and I'll maybe dip my toes into Poirot. I don't think I'll like him as much, but I'll give it a go. The next book I read, The Discord of Gods by Jen Lyons, is the 5th and final book in the Course of Dragons series, which is, I think I'm going to make a video this month about this series and another series that I read and finished this month that I really like, and I want to like talk more in depth about them, but in the interest of keeping this wrap-up video not an eternity long, I'm not going to. I really liked this book. It breaks the narrative structure of the series, but for a reason, so I'm not mad about it, and it's a little bit all over the place because you follow a lot of different viewpoint characters, but honestly, it's only 512 pages, and I think that's a really reasonable length for a book that is trying to do so much. Like, there is a lot to wrap up, and it's done very well. I did not have an issue with the ending of this series. I liked it. I rated it 5 stars. Great book. Chef's kiss. Love this series. Next, I read Finlay Donovan is Killing It, which is the first in the Finlay Donovan series by El Cosimano, and I rated it 4.75 stars. It wasn't a perfect book. I wasn't like head over heels in love with it, but I did really enjoy it. It's fun. It's weird. You follow a single mother who is recently divorced because her husband cheated on her. Love that for her. She is a writer, but she's struggling. She sits in a Panera with her agent, and the way they're talking, she gets mistaken for a hit woman. And the person sitting behind her slips her a note and basically like hires her to kill her husband. The woman in Panera's husband, not Finlay's husband. And yeah, I loved this book. It was so much fun, and I would say like the mystery isn't the strongest part of this book. The mystery was good, but I enjoyed the characters and the shenanigans more than I enjoyed the mystery, which is like not a diss on the mystery. It's just not, it's not exactly the focal point of this book, I think, which is fine. Next, I read the book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James, and I really wanted to like this book, but here's the thing about this book. It has a ghost plotline, and I was not clear on that from all of the pitches for this book that I heard. And so I did only rate it 3.75 stars, and honestly, I think it's more of a 3.5. I didn't like it that much. It wasn't a bad book, and I found like the mystery and the thriller part and our viewpoint character, I really liked her. I liked the way they told the story with flashbacks and forwards from like the maybe a murderous, maybe not character we're following. I hated the ending. I didn't like the ending. I didn't like the ghost plot line. I think it would have been more interesting if it hadn't been an actual ghost, but that's not what the author chose to do. So, agree to disagree, I guess. I also read Tithe, A Modern Fairy Tale by Holly Black, which is the first in the collection of modern fairy tale books, and I didn't love it. Like, I'm not frothing at the mouth about it like I was with the Cruel Prince trilogy, but it's a good book. I really like the prose in this book. Is not like continuously amazing, but there are some moments in this book that are just so beautiful. The metaphors and the descriptions are done so well. I really loved them. I liked the premise and the plot of this book, and I liked our two like main characters and their dynamic. There is a moment in this book that is going to stick with me for a very long time, where a fairy is very calmly sitting on a couch with our main character's grandmother and eating honey straight out of the bottle, and I really liked that really incongruous moment. It was a good moment. I'll definitely be reading more of the Modern Fairy Tale collection. I really like Holly Black's writing, and she writes about fairies in a way that like really meshes with my concept of the Fae, so it's always a fun thing. And last but certainly not fucking least, we have the Lion Hunters series by Elizabeth Wynn. This is the same person who wrote Codename Verity, and if you've read it, you know that book absolutely destroys you and tears you to shreds, and so does this series. Oh my god. So all of the books, there's 5 books, all of them except one I rated 5 stars because they are really good. The first one I rated 4 stars, not because it's bad, but because I feel A, it's the weakest of the series, and B, it just didn't hit me like the other ones did, and I'm not exactly sure why. It just didn't. I had read it before, and it might be that it just wasn't as impactful because a lot of the emotional beats I'd already gotten hit with because of I was reading it for the second time. These books, this is the second series that I'm going to talk about in a like specific video about them, so I'm going to try not to get into it too much, but here's basically the gist of them. These books are about like, I think it's like, I want to say 6th century English and like Middle Eastern African politics, and a family that's like at the center of all of this. Somehow the like politics get quite complicated, but in a way, she writes them in a way that I felt that it was easy enough to follow. I love the characters. And the second book in the series, A Coalition of Lions, made me sob so much. It gave me a CFS flare for the rest of the day. Like, it wore me out. And I would be mad about it, except the book was so beautiful. Elizabeth Wynn does something very similar to one of my favorite authors, Megan Whalen Turner, where she writes very subtly. So she is very much gesturing towards emotional moments instead of like making them completely out in the open. But because you know so much about these characters, even their like, anytime there is an emotional moment, it hits. Like, she does not stop hitting, and it's so good. Like I said, all but the first I rated 5 stars. I loved it. I tore through the last 3 books in 2 days. This series is the reason why I read 22 books this month. It's so good and it's so emotional. Definitely be warned. The first book especially is The Winter Prince is very dark and very heavy. There's incest, domestic abuse, emotional abuse, a lot of like grooming, all of that's involved. Not all of it is on page. There's definitely emotional abuse on page, and like the aftermath of grooming on page. The incest is only talked about, it is not shown. But yeah, it's a pretty dark and it's a really brutal book. The rest of the books I would say are slightly less brutal, but I would say look up content warnings, or honestly, like even comment, or for those of you who know me and can contact me directly, if you're really interested in this series but you're maybe worried about content, message me and I'll give you a rundown. So that's all 22 books that I read in May. This video is going to be a monster, but I hope you enjoyed. And look out for, I will be talking about The Chorus of Dragons and the Lion Hunter series more in depth, I think, in a separate video, because I have a lot of thoughts about both of these series that I really want to dig into in more depth. But I don't want to make this wrap-up video a million years long, because I value your time. And yeah. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you want to see more of my videos, hit the subscribe button and potentially even hit the notification bell. And if you have any thoughts, comments, recommendations, anything, go ahead and put them in the comments below. I will see you next time. And again, thanks for watching.